welcome to this session. And I just want to start by thanking Bob and Nancy for inviting me. Nancy was also nice enough to be talking at one of our events in the IB a few months ago, using technology, because she couldn't travel. I was supposed to be watching her live in the UK, but I couldn't travel either because it was this hash cloud over Europe. So we both ended up using technology to hear each other. So today I'll be talking about education and technology in a global economy. This is a presentation that I gave back in May. I was asked by the EdTech Summit in California, in the US, to basically share my thoughts of where education was going in relation to technology. And they put me as a keynote speaker, and basically I came up with this presentation and thought it would be nice to share it with you. And of course we'll have time for questions in the end. Let me first start by talking about changes. And I think one of the things that's very important in any domain is to understand where we are in history. And changes is happening at a rate that's never been seen, ever. The transformation of our society because of the internet is really making things very, very different. And if we look back at what has happened with internet, again, it was started in the 70s, a small project in the Department of Defense in the US. They decided to make it public in 1988, which is not that long ago. Before that, it was just a US Department of Defense technology. It was called the ARPANET. And then suddenly it started to boom. By 1995, there were about 16 million people were using it. 5 years later, in 2000, 360 million people were connected. And today, 1.8 billion people, it's about 26% of the world population, have access to this media. And you think about how many people don't even have a house or don't have electricity and water. 26% of the world population have access to this technology. It's an amazing change. But let's look at, I like looking at history again to understand where we are. This picture was taken in 1954. RAND is a corporation, they still exist today, from California. They're global policy think tank organization. They put some of their best scientists to come up with a model of what a personal computer might look like 50 years later. So that was their vision back in 1954 of what a personal computer might look like in 2004. When I showed that picture to my sons, because I have 3 boys, of course they said, "Oh, Dad, can I play a computer game on this thing?" And especially with the wheel, it just looks so cool. So there must be some great car games running up of this platform. I said, well, this actually was not a working computer. The only thing that was working was the little teletype in front, the little keyboard. And because of that, the scientists were very hopeful that in 50 years, science would evolve enough to make this work. They were a bit worried that people would have enough space to put this in each of our homes, especially in Hong Kong. But you look at, again, history, I guess some people had a different perspective of how technology ended up evolving. Our friend Steve Jobs here showing us his, not his latest gadget, but one of his gadgets that he came up with a few years ago. In 1963, someone had a dream, and you look 46 years later, someone else's dream became true. There's been amazing changes in the past 40, 50 years going in society. In 1968, for the first time in the history of human, we had people going around the moon. So the morning of the December 24th, this picture was taken by the 3 astronauts that went for the first time around the moon. So the 2, William Anders and Frank Borman, were the 2 astronauts looking at this view. And basically one of them said, "Oh my God, here's the Earth rising. Wow, is that pretty?" And that was actually his exact word. And the other one said, "Well, pass me the camera, we need to take a picture." And he replied, "Oh, I forgot it in the car." Which, of course, this last part is not true, because they actually took that. This is the real picture from them. But amazing amount of change has happened, because you look today, we're sending rovers on Mars, bringing amazing picture. We're talking about now sending human around the planet Mars in the next 20 years. So amazing level of change. Let's look at a classroom now. So this picture was taken in the 50s. The little guy standing up, his name was Tom. Like the RAND scientist, he also wanted to give his perspective of what a classroom might look like 50 years later. So he did a drawing. The drawing is at the back of the classroom. You see all these, the kids drawing there. Let's look at his drawing. He was a great artist, by the way. I thought this was a photo the first time I saw this. But jokes apart, you look at a classroom today, it hasn't changed much. There's still kids sitting at the back of table with books, with pencils. Pretty much, except that it's a color picture, it looks quite identical to what you could see in the 50s. There is technology at the back. You see a TV there. Well, it doesn't seem to be much used. So the point is, education hasn't necessarily followed what has been happening outside. If we look again in society, some of the changes that have happened, especially in industry, you look at Fortune 500 company, the churn rate is at a level never seen. Churn rate means companies, every year companies get out of Fortune 500, a new one comes in, because some new one are become bigger than the previous one. The churn rate between 1955 to 1995 was about 4%, which means every year about 20 companies would be taken out, 20 new ones would be added. Very stable rate, average 4%. From 1995, it just started to increase. Every year started to be bigger. Today it's 8%, doubled in 15 years. So right now, every year, 40 companies are taken out of Fortune 500 and 40 are added. So you start seeing a churn in the industry that's never been seen either. So you see names like eBay, Amazon, Google, that didn't exist 10 years ago, are making it up as well some of the biggest companies in the world. You also see names disappear. And I think one important statistic from our previous slide that I want to mention as well is the average tenure on the list used to be 70 years, which means when you were a Fortune 500 company, before, you had existed in average for about 70 years. That was a statistic from 1995. Now, it's about 20 years, which is amazing. Only in 15 years, the average time that companies have been in this list has gone from 70 years to 20 years. So you can really see there's some level of change out there that's amazing in terms of speed. Some big names have disappeared. I mean, some large companies don't exist anymore. I'm a big movie fan, so I had to put some name of companies related to movies. So I put DeLorean. Anybody can name me what famous movie was featuring this car? Back to the Future, of course. Remember Dr. Brown, this amazing scientist? Loved it. Pan Am. Anybody can tell me a very good movie?
Catch Me If You Can.
Yes, Leonardo DiCaprio, right? This guy who was pretending to be a Pan Am pilot airline and was stealing millions to the company. That might be why they went bankrupt, I don't know, but it was a true story, by the way. But these companies have completely disappeared. You see RCA, Digital, Compaq. Those of you who were around in the 80s, I mean, companies like Digital and Compaq were very, very big, and they don't exist anymore. Some companies have left in a way we're not going to talk too much today. But you see big names like MCI WorldCom, Lehman's Brothers, more recently. Very big names are just completely gone. Then if we look in society, we have the new Z generation, right? These are the kids born, from the 95s to today's. They're born with technology in their hand, basically. They love touching this technology. They love playing with it. They're really what we call the digital native. And this phenomenon is happening absolutely everywhere. I mean, I lived myself 4 years in China, in Beijing, and I remember once I was on a trip in Yangshuo, in the middle of rice field with my family on a bicycle, and we come to a river, and there's this little guy who was, a bamboo boat, raft. It was more a raft than a boat. We had to pay a few yuan to cross the river, and suddenly my phone rings, and I'm in the middle of nowhere. So I get it to answer, and I realized it was actually his phone that was ringing. I was like, wow, this guy has a phone, and he had a pretty good phone for a bamboo raft driver. But basically, technology is absolutely booming everywhere. And if you go to China, you'll see all these kids with technology in their hand. It's really the next generation, and technology has become a fundamental part of their lives. If I give you the example, I mean, I have 3 teenagers myself, and I used to be very frustrated at them, because the way they were studying was really frustrating me, because I thought they didn't know how to study, because you get in their room and they have, some books open, but they have like 15 windows open on their computer. They're in a second life, a virtual world, they're IMing with their friends, they're using their mobile, keeps on receiving SMS, they're on Facebook, they're on YouTube. And I'm like, I used to actually put rules in my router, because I'm an IT guy, so I know how to play with routers that would block MSN and between this time and this time, until I realized that they were studying in a completely different way than I used to. Sometimes they were fooling around, but in most cases they were actually talking with friends about their homework, just doing their homework in a completely different way, collaboration remotely using technology. Until I realized that, and then I was more flexible. But initially it was like, come on, studying, you take a book, you open it, you read, you study. That's the way I've done it, right? So let's look at Facebook, because I think it's important to, when we understand the level of change that's going on there, to understand why some of the things are so popular. Facebook was, this 19-year-old young guy, Mark Zuckerberg, very young, was not that good at school, decided to come up with this platform, and suddenly it was amazing. It was used by so many people. I did this chart in May, 400 million users. I just read recently that it's about to reach 500 million users now. So like 500 million people are using this platform. Why is it so popular? I mean, it's been translated into like more than 100 languages. It has penetrated a third of entire population in multiple markets. In the US, for instance, 110 million people are using it. That's about 36% of their population. That's amazing. First quarter of this year, 8 million new users were grandparents, which is not just the kids. It's impacting everywhere in the population. I mean, it's probably grandparents being told by their grandkids, if you don't log there, you're not going to know anything about me, because that's where I put everything. But it's just happening everywhere, basically. And the question is your classroom providing a similar experience? If you look at education, what's so special about Facebook that makes it so popular? And is, in a typical classroom, providing the same level of interaction, the same level of collaboration that you see in Facebook, the same level of creation? Children constantly create content into their account. The community, the sense of community, their friends that they create relationship with, this whole concept of building relationship that you see in Facebook, the connection with people. I mean, I found one of the friends I had lost from 15 years ago. I found him on Facebook, and we had dinner this summer, and I had no idea where he lived, and just no way to find him. And type his name on Facebook, found him in 2 minutes. And that level of connecting between people. Do we have the same concept in classroom? The participation that we see in Facebook. The sharing of information. It's not just a one-way thing. You're sharing a lot about you. And this overall, all these angles that have made Facebook so popular, I think we need to ask ourselves the question from a classroom perspective, does it really use the same approach or some of these approaches? Well, Stephen Heppel was saying every turned-off device is potentially a turned-off child. Stephen Heppel is the CEO of Heppel.net. Very great person. This other guy was saying, when I go to school, I have to power down. So you see children using devices connected with their friends. Suddenly they go to school, they sit down, and ooh, it's like, I'm on a different level of power here, or energy. This other guy is saying, well, it's not attention deficit. I'm just not listening. This little guy, his name was John. He was sleeping. This was a history class. Of course, he didn't pass the test. He didn't hear anything the teacher was saying. So when he came back home, he had to explain to his dad and mom why he failed the test. So he said, well, the teacher was stupid. He kept on asking questions on things that happened before I was born. How do you expect me to know that? Well, it was not a great reason, but I guess you see more and more children sleeping in classes because they find it boring. This guy is saying, why do you ban the basic communication tool that I use all the time? Again, turn off all your devices and just listen to a teacher. And this little fella, I love that picture, by the way. You seriously want me to go to school, but I don't know who took that picture. I found it on the web, but I find it very, very funny.